The air vibrated, thick with the scent of gasoline and frying onions, a heady mix that usually signaled a good time. Today, for Lily, it was just a wall of noise and looming figures. The annual Bikes for Tykes charity show was in full swing at the fairgrounds, a kaleidoscope of gleaming chrome and roaring engines. Men and women in leather vests, emblazoned with patches she didn't quite understand, milled about, laughing loud, their voices rumbling like the very bikes they rode. Lily, all 7 years of her, felt like a tiny sparrow lost in a forest of oak trees. Her small hand clutched the faded strap of her unicorn backpack, a silent comfort against the tremor in her chest. The black eye, a blossoming bruise of purple and yellow, felt like a beacon, drawing every eye to her, even though she knew most people were too busy admiring the custom choppers. She kept her gaze fixed on the ground, counting the cracks in the asphalt, until a particularly loud burst of laughter made her jump. She'd practiced her lines in front of the cracked bathroom mirror all morning, whispering them until her throat felt scratchy. Now, the words felt heavy, stuck somewhere between her stomach and her tongue. She took a deep breath, tasting the exhaust fumes, and looked up. A cluster of men stood near a monstrous fire engine red Harley, its handlebars gleaming like a pair of polished horns. Their vests bore the distinctive Hell's Angels patch, a winged skull she'd only ever seen on the news or in her mom's hushed warnings. These were the ones. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape its cage. She walked towards them, each step feeling like an eternity, her worn sneakers scuffing on the concrete. As she drew closer, the men's chatter died down. One of them, a man with a beard as white as fresh snow and an eye patch over one eye, turned to face her. His gaze, though stern, held a surprising softness. "Well, hello there, little lady," he rumbled, his voice like gravel but not unkind. "Lost your parents?" Lily shook her head, her braids bouncing. This was it. The moment. She took another shaky breath. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. But then she remembered her practice. "No, I'm not lost. I need to ask you something." The men exchanged puzzled glances. The bearded man, who Lily later learned was named Reaper, knelt down, bringing his good eye closer to her level. "What can we do for you, sweet pea?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern as his gaze landed on her black eye. Tears, hot and sudden, sprang to her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but they spilled over, tracing paths down her smudged cheeks. Will one of you be my dad?" The words tumbled out, raw and desperate, laced with the salty tang of her tears. A collective gasp rippled through the group. The easy smiles vanished, replaced by looks of shock and confusion. Reaper's kind eyes widened, and he glanced at his brothers, a silent question passing between them. My dad," Lily continued, the words now a torrent. "He hurts me and Mom. And tomorrow is Dad's day at school. Everyone has to bring their dad, and I just want someone kind, just once." She choked on a sob, her small frame shaking. "Just one day, please?" The roar of the bikes, the laughter, the music. It all faded into a distant hum. The fairgrounds, once a chaotic symphony, became eerily silent around their small huddle. Reaper's hand, calloused and scarred, reached out, hovering for a moment before gently wiping a tear from Lily's cheek with his thumb. The touch was surprisingly tender, a stark contrast to the hard lines of his face. "Hurts you and your mom?" Another biker, a younger man with a neatly trimmed goatee, asked, his voice low and dangerous. Lily nodded, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling. "He gets mad a lot, and he He pushed me yesterday because I spilled juice. The air around the Hells Angels hardened, a palpable shift from easy camaraderie to simmering fury. Their faces, once jovial, were now etched with grim determination. Reaper's jaw tightened. He looked at the black eye again, a slow burn igniting in his good eye. He rose to his full height, his gaze sweeping over his brothers. The silent communication was clear. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Reaper asked, his voice now a low growl, but directed at Lily with unwavering tenderness. "Lily," she whispered, peeking through her fingers. "Well, Lily," Reaper said, a new resolve in his tone. "You just tell your teacher that your dad will be there. And he'll be the proudest dad in that whole damn school." He exchanged another look with his brothers, a silent pact sealing the deal. "You got a picture of your school, Lilybug?" Lily sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "It's Northwood Elementary, and it has a big oak tree in the front." "Northwood Elementary," Reaper repeated, etching the name into his memory. "And what time does this Dad's Day start?" 9 o'clock, Lily said, a tiny flicker of hope igniting in her tear-filled eyes. "But I have to be there by 8:30. Reaper nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. "You got it, kiddo. You just worry about being the best student you can be. We'll take care of the rest." He knelt once more, his eye softening. "And don't you worry about that bruise, Lily. Nobody's going to hurt you or your mom ever again. You understand?" Lily nodded, a sense of safety, foreign and comforting, settling over her. She watched as the men, once intimidating giants, now seemed like protectors. They were still big, still loud, but their eyes held a warmth she hadn't expected. She left the fairgrounds that day, not with a picture of a bike, but with a promise that felt heavier and more precious than gold. The roar of the bikes, which had once filled her with apprehension, now echoed in her ears like a lullaby, a promise of kindness and protection. The next morning, the first rays of dawn were just painting the sky in soft oranges and purples when the first rumble started. It wasn't a solitary growl, but a chorus, growing steadily louder. 50 leather-clad Hells Angels, a formidable wave of chrome and muscle, converged on Northwood Elementary. The quiet suburban street, usually filled with the gentle hum of school buses and parent drop-offs, vibrated with an entirely different kind of energy. Each man wore his club vest, their patches gleaming under the nascent sun, and each wore a look of unwavering determination. As they dismounted their magnificent machines, the collective roar of their engines faded, replaced by the heavy thud of their boots on the pavement. A bewildered crossing guard, initially frozen by the sight, slowly raised her stop sign, her mouth agape. The school principal, a meticulously dressed woman named Mrs. Albright, rushed out of the main entrance, her face a mixture of alarm and confusion. Reaper, leading the charge, adjusted his eye patch and strode purposefully towards the school doors, his brothers fanning out behind him like a protective vanguard. He spotted Mrs. Albright, her neat blonde bob askew from her hurried exit. "Morning, Principal Albright," Reaper announced, his voice carrying across the silent street. "We're here for Dad's Day. Lily's our daughter." Mrs. Albright blinked, her gaze sweeping over the 50 burly men and their intimidating motorcycles. "Lily?" she stammered, utterly flabbergasted. Just then, the front doors of the school opened, and Lily, her unicorn backpack firmly on her shoulders, emerged. Her black eye was still visible, but a wide, beaming smile lit up her face. She spotted Reaper, then the sea of leather and chrome behind him. Her small hand shot up, waving furiously. "Dad!" she cried, her voice ringing with pure joy. Dads! 50 burly men, their faces etched with tough lines and battle scars, watched as Lily ran towards them. As she launched herself into Reaper's open arms, a collective cheer erupted from the Hells Angels, a sound that shook the very foundations of Northwood Elementary. Each one of them, in that moment, was Lily's proud father. A small voice in the crowd. The collective gasp rippled through the Northwood Elementary auditorium, a wave of stunned silence following the roar of 50 Harley-Davidson engines. Teachers, parents, and students alike stared, mouths agape, as a tide of leather and chrome-studded vests flowed through the double doors. Each man, a walking testament to intimidation, bore the iconic Hells Angels patch. But their eyes, usually hard and unyielding, softened as they scanned the sea of small faces, searching. Lily, clutching her worn teddy bear, stood on the stage, a tiny island in a sea of adults. Her black eye, though fading, was still a stark purple against her pale skin. When her gaze landed on Reaper, his massive frame filling the doorway, a tremor ran through her. He was even, bigger than she remembered, his face a roadmap of scars and sun-weathered lines. Yet a peculiar sense of calm settled over her. She knew him. He was one of her dads. Lily! Reaper's voice, a gravelly rumble, cut through the silence. He strode forward, his biker boots thudding softly on the polished floor. The other angels fanned out behind him, forming an imposing semicircle. Lily's eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and wonder, darted from face to face. So many of them. 50. Just as they'd promised. Mrs. Davison, the principal, a woman whose stern demeanor usually commanded immediate respect, found her voice first. It was a shaky whisper. Mr. Reaper and gentlemen, can I help you? Reaper stopped directly in front of the stage, his head tilted back to look at Lily. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. We're here for Dad's Day, ma'am. For our daughter, Lily. He gestured with a thumb over his shoulder to the phalanx of bikers behind him. All of us. A fresh wave of murmurs swept through the auditorium. Some parents pulled their children closer, their expressions a mix of fear and bewilderment. Other faces, however, particularly those of a few mothers who looked like they'd seen their own share of hard times, held a flicker of understanding, even admiration. Lily, emboldened by Reaper's presence, took a tentative step forward. They're my dads, she announced, her small voice surprisingly clear, echoing in the suddenly hushed hall. She pointed a finger at Reaper, then swept it across the line of grim-faced bikers. All of them. A ripple of low chuckles went through the angels. One of them, a man with a long, braided beard, winked at Lily. That's right, sweetheart. You've got the biggest family in Northwood now. Mrs. Davison, still visibly flustered, cleared her throat. While we appreciate the enthusiasm, Mr. Reaper, the event is designed for one father per child. Reaper's smile vanished, replaced by a steely gaze. With all due respect, ma'am, Lily's had enough of one father. Today, she gets as many as she needs. We're here to make sure she feels safe, loved, and proud. And if that means 50 of us, then 50 of us it is. His voice, though not raised, carried an undeniable authority that brooked no argument. He then turned back to Lily, his expression softening once more. Ready to show us what you've got, princess? Lily nodded, a shy smile gracing her lips. For the first time in her young life, she felt truly seen, truly protected. The fear that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning sense of belonging. She looked out at the sea of faces, at her classmates and their bewildered parents, and then back at the formidable men who were now inexplicably, her father's. A warmth spread through her chest. Today, she wouldn't just have a dad. She'd have an army. And for a 7-year-old girl who had known only cruelty, that was everything. She clutched her teddy bear a little tighter and began her presentation, her voice gaining strength with every word. The question that silenced the roar. The roar of 50 engines, which had just moments ago declared Lily's newfound dominion over the Northwood Elementary playground, began to dissipate. The principal, Mrs. Albright, her face a mask of bewildered indignation, stood frozen. Her carefully manicured image of order had been irrevocably shattered by the sheer, unadulterated presence of the Hells Angels. Lily, however, felt none of the principal's distress. She clutched the rough leather of Reaper's cut, a small, triumphant smile playing on her bruised lips. This was her army, her shield against a world that had, until now, felt relentlessly sharp. Then, a small, reedy voice cut through the lingering exhaust fumes, a sound almost swallowed by the fading rumble. "Lily?" All 50 heads, a sea of leather and tattoos, turned. Mrs. Albright flinched. Standing by the chain-link fence, looking impossibly small and frail, was a woman with hair the color of faded straw and eyes that seemed perpetually on the verge of tears. Lily's mom. A hush fell over the assembled bikers, a silence more profound than the earlier engine roar. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm, or perhaps a reckoning. Lily stiffened, her small hand tightening its grip on Reaper's vest. Her mom's presence, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a tremor of unease. "Lily, what is all this?" Her mother's voice was barely a whisper, laced with a familiar tremor of fear. Her gaze darted from the intimidating array of motorcycles to Reaper, then to the other burly men, finally settling on the principal's horrified expression. The black eye on her daughter's face seemed to throb with renewed intensity under her mother's scrutiny. Reaper, who had been radiating an aura of unwavering protectiveness, felt a subtle shift. This was a different kind of challenge, one that couldn't be met with a glare or a clenched fist. He loosened his grip on Lily's shoulder, a silent concession to the delicate balance of the moment. Lily, still nestled against his side, looked up at her mother. The triumphant gleam in her eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by a flicker of the vulnerability that had drawn the bikers to her in the first place. "They're my dad's, Mama," she announced, her voice softer than before, but still firm. "All of them." Her mother's eyes widened, filling with a confusion that bordered on panic. She looked at Mrs. Albright, as if seeking an explanation from the utterly flummoxed principal. "Dads? Lily, what are you talking about?" Before Lily could answer, a woman's voice, sharp and laced with a sneer, cut through the tense air. "Oh, please. Like any of these would be a proper father." All eyes swung to the source. It was Brenda, a parent known for her perfectly coiffed hair and even more perfectly crafted gossip. She stood with a small group of other parents, their expressions a mix of fear and judgment. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the sea of leather-clad men. "They're Hell's Angels, for goodness sake. What kind of example is that?" A low growl rumbled through the ranks of the bikers. Reaper's jaw tightened. The fragile peace was threatening to shatter. Lily's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Then Lily did something remarkable. She stepped forward, out from Reaper's protective shadow, and faced Brenda. Her small frame, usually so timid, was imbued with an unexpected resolve. She pointed a finger, not at Brenda, but at the black eye that still dominated her face. "My real dad, she said, her voice clear and surprisingly strong. Gave me this. She tapped her bruised cheek. And he hurt Mama too. Her gaze swept across the assembled bikers, then back to Brenda. These dads, she continued, her voice gaining in power, they just want to make sure I'm safe and happy. She looked back at her mother, her eyes pleading for understanding. They're kind, Mama. Really kind. The simple truth of her words hung in the air, silencing not only Brenda but the entire playground. The judgment in Brenda's face faltered, replaced by a flicker of something that might have been shame. The other parents shifted uncomfortably. Lily's mother's eyes, still wide, slowly filled not with fear, but with a dawning comprehension. She looked at her daughter, truly looked at her, and then at the 50 men who stood, silent and watchful, behind her. Reaper took a step forward, placing a hand gently on Lily's shoulder. His gaze met her mother's, and for the first time, a softer emotion replaced the steely resolve in his eyes. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The question, unspoken, hung between them. Are we enough? Are we what she needs? Lily's mother's gaze lingered on her daughter's bruised face, then swept over the protective phalanx of bikers. The world had always been a scary place for her, a place where she often felt powerless. But looking at Lily, standing tall and brave amidst these formidable men, she saw a different future. She saw safety. She saw strength. And in the unwavering eyes of Reaper, she saw an unexpected promise. A single tear tracked down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of fear. It was a tear of release, of hope. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she stood beside Lily. She reached out, not to pull Lily away, but to gently touch her daughter's hair. Then she looked at Reaper, her voice still trembling, but with a new conviction. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze encompassing all 50 men. "Thank you for being her dads." The silence that followed wasn't tense or awkward. It was a profound, almost sacred quiet, a space where the unspoken promises and shared understanding settled into place. The roar had been silenced, not by fear, but by a simple, heartfelt question, and an even simpler, more profound answer. A tearful explanation. The awkward silence stretched, thick and humid, between Lily, her mother, and the intimidating semicircle of Hell's Angels. Lily, emboldened by the recent clash with Mrs. Henderson, took her mother's hand, her small fingers surprisingly firm. "Mama," she began, her voice clearer than her mother had heard it in years. "These are my dads. They keep me safe." Her mother, Sarah, blinked, her gaze flitting from Lily's earnest face to the burly men in leather, then back again. Confusion warred with a nascent understanding in her eyes. "Dads?" she whispered, the word tasting foreign on her tongue. Her history with men had left her wary, bruised, and perpetually on edge. The idea of dads, plural, especially these formidable figures, was almost too much to process. "Yeah, Mama," Lily affirmed, a small defiant tilt to her chin. "They came to school with me when I needed them. And they're really kind." She looked up at Hammer, who offered a gentle, reassuring nod. "They're not like him." The unspoken name hung in the air, a shadow from the past that still clung to them both. Sarah's breath hitched, the memory of the black eye, the timid request, the overwhelming presence of 50 men at Lily's school. It all coalesced into a stunning realization. She saw not just the leather and the tattoos, but the quiet protectiveness in their stances, the unexpected tenderness in their eyes when they looked at her daughter. She saw the change in Lily, too, the newfound confidence, the vibrant spark that had been extinguished by fear and uncertainty. A tremor ran through Sarah. Tears, long held back, welled in her eyes, blurring the edges of the playground, the bright primary colors of the swings, and the imposing figures of the bikers. She sank to her knees, pulling Lily into a tight embrace, her face buried in her daughter's hair. "Oh, Lily," she choked out, the words raw with a mixture of relief, guilt, and profound gratitude. I didn't know." Hammer, ever the pragmatist, cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he rumbled, his voice softer than usual. "We ain't looking for trouble. We just care about Lily. She's part of our family now." Sarah pulled back from Lily, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes clearer now, shining with a light that had been absent for too long. She looked at Hammer, then at Axe, then at the other faces, each one etched with a strange blend of roughness and genuine concern. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Thank you all. I haven't been able to protect her the way she deserves." Her gaze dropped to Lily's still visible bruise, a stark reminder of her failures. Lily, sensing her mother's renewed vulnerability, squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mama. They're here now." Axe stepped forward, his expression surprisingly gentle. "No kid deserves to feel scared in their own home, ma'am. And no mom should have to go through that alone. If you need a place to stay, or just someone to watch your back, we got you." The offer hung in the air, weighted with implications. Sarah had always prided herself on her independence, even in the face of insurmountable odds. But her independence had also left her isolated, vulnerable. She looked at Lily, whose small face glowed with a trust that had been hard-won. The image of the Hell's Angels, a formidable shield against the world's harshness, began to replace the old, ingrained fear. I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, overwhelmed. Hammer knelt down, bringing his massive frame closer to her eye level. "You don't have to say anything right now, ma'am. Just know that Lily's safe with us. And if you want to be safe too, we'll make sure of it." The sun, previously veiled by clouds, broke through, bathing the playground in a warm, golden light. Sarah looked at her daughter, at the men who had become her unexpected protectors, and a fragile seed of hope began to sprout in her weary heart. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges she couldn't yet fathom. But for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. And Lily, clutching her hand, offered a smile that promised a future brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. Hearts shattered. The scent of pine cleaner and stale coffee hung in the air of the school office, a stark contrast to the fragrant leather and faint exhaust fumes that usually trailed the Angels. Lily sat on the worn floral sofa, a picture she'd drawn of her new family clutched in her hand. 50 stick figures, each with a tiny red wing on their back, surrounded a smiling girl and a woman with wavy hair. Her mom, Sarah, sat beside her, a tremor in her hand as she signed a form. Redwood, surprisingly gentle for a man of his stature, stood guard just inside the door, his presence a comforting weight. "It's just a standard enrollment form, Mrs. Miller," Mrs. Gable, the principal, explained, her voice overly sweet, a thinly veiled attempt to mask her unease. "We just need emergency contacts and parental guardians." She cast a nervous glance at Redwood, then at the various Angels loitering in the hallway, their rumbling murmurs a constant counterpoint to the office's hushed formality. Sarah's pen hesitated over the line for Father Guardian. A flush crept up her neck. "Lily's father's," she began, then looked to Redwood. Redwood stepped forward, his boots thudding softly on the linoleum. "She's got a few of 'em, ma'am. Any of us can be reached. Just put down the club number, and they'll patch you through." He offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Consider us all her legal guardians." Mrs. Gable's eyes widened. "All of you?" "That's right," came a chorus of voices from the hallway, as several more angels leaned in, their faces a mixture of solemnity and barely contained amusement. Sarah, despite the strange circumstances, felt a surge of warmth. This was it. This was their new life, unconventional as it was. A life where her daughter had 50 fathers, and she, a scared, timid woman, had an entire brotherhood watching over them. Weeks turned into a rhythm, a strange but comforting dance between school runs and club meetings. Lily thrived. Her laughter, once a rare, fragile thing, now echoed through the clubhouse. She spent afternoons tinkering in the garage with Knuckles, learning the names of tools, her small hands smudged with grease. She'd read stories to Gator, perched on his lap, his massive arms forming a protective cage around her. Her artwork, a riot of vibrant colors and intricate details, adorned the clubhouse walls, each drawing a testament to her growing confidence. Sarah, too, slowly unfurled. She began helping out around the clubhouse, organizing supplies, cooking meals, her natural efficiency finding a new outlet. The angels, once imposing figures, became a tapestry of individual personalities, some gruff but kind, others boisterous and playful. She found a quiet camaraderie with the few women who were occasionally around, finding solace in shared stories and understanding gazes. The weight that had pressed down on her for so long began to lift, replaced by a lightness she hadn't known was possible. One particularly balmy afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the clubhouse buzzed with an unusual energy. The rumble of engines grew louder, closer, signaling the return of a road trip. Lily, perched on Redwood's shoulders, clapped her hands, eagerly awaiting the familiar faces. Sarah stood nearby, a soft smile gracing her lips. But as the first bikes pulled into the yard, the smiles on the angels' faces faltered. Their usual boisterous greetings were replaced by hushed whispers and solemn nods. A knot of unease tightened in Sarah's stomach. Lily, sensing the shift, gripped Redwood's hair, her earlier excitement replaced by a quiet apprehension. Then she saw him. Not one of the returning angels, but a stranger, his face contorted in a mask of rage, being held back by two unfamiliar men. His eyes, cold and dark, locked onto Sarah. He saw Lily too, still on Redwood's shoulders, and a chilling recognition flickered in his gaze. "Sarah!" he roared, his voice raw and guttural, cutting through the sudden silence. "You think you can just disappear? Take my daughter?" Lily's breath hitched. Redwood instinctively tightened his grip on her, shielding her face against his neck. The blood drained from Sarah's face, leaving her ashen. The monster from her past, the man who had haunted her dreams, stood before her, his presence shattering the fragile peace they had built. Her heart, once mended, felt as though it were tearing apart all over again. The clubhouse, once a sanctuary, suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. The air crackled with unspoken threats, the promise of violence hanging heavy. The angels, their faces grim, moved to form a protective wall around Sarah and Lily, their hands instinctively going to the knives and bludgeons they always carried. The man, Mark, struggled against his captors, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. "You're not taking her anywhere." Redwood's voice was a low growl, a rumble that vibrated through Lily's small frame. Mark laughed, a chilling, humorless sound. "Oh, I am. And you'll watch. Both of you." His gaze swept over the gathered angels, a sneer twisting his lips. You think a bunch of thugs can protect you? I own her, and the girl. The words were a physical blow to Sarah. The terror she had thought long buried surged anew, suffocating her. Her legs threatened to give out. She reached for Lily, her hand trembling. This was it. The past had caught up, and it was merciless. A promise made. The clubhouse air, usually thick with the scent of leather and camaraderie, now crackled with an unfamiliar tension. Mark's sudden appearance had sucked all the oxygen from the room, leaving a vacuum of dread. Sarah instinctively pulled Lily closer, her hand a white-knuckled vice on her daughter's shoulder. Lily, usually so fearless, pressed into her mother's side, her gaze flicking between her biological father and the stony faces of the angels surrounding them. Well, 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 Mark drawled, his eyes sweeping over the room, lingering on the patches and the glint of chrome. Looks like Sarah's finally found herself some real protectors. His tone was laced with a sneering derision that grated on every nerve. But I'm not here for her. I'm here for my daughter. He pointed a finger at Lily, an possessive glint in his eyes that made Sarah's stomach churn. Mark's gaze landed on Hammer, who stood a little apart, his arms crossed, a silent, immovable wall. You must be the big dog, Mark sneered, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes betraying his bravado. Let me tell you something, big dog. You can't just steal a man's child. Hammer's voice, when it came, was a low rumble, devoid of inflection, yet it carried an undeniable weight. No one's stolen anything, Mark. Lily is where she belongs. She belongs with her father, Mark countered, stepping forward, his chest puffing out. And I'm her father. The word hung in the air, a vile accusation. Several of the angels shifted, their hands unconsciously going to their holstered weapons, a collective growl building in the room. Sarah felt a surge of fear, not for herself, but for Lily, for the fragile peace they had built. She looked at Hammer, a silent plea in her eyes. Hammer met her gaze, a fleeting, reassuring nod. Then his attention snapped, back to Mark, his eyes like chips of granite. You forfeited that title a long time ago, he stated, his voice still low, but now with an edge of steel. A father protects. A father cherishes. You did neither. Mark scoffed, a brittle sound. And you think you can just waltz in and replace me? You, a bunch of thugs? He laughed, a short, humorless bark. I'll take her to court. I'll expose all of you. Child Services will have a field day with this circus. The threat, though empty to the angels, struck a cold fear in Sarah's heart. She knew how easily the system could be swayed, how quickly they could lose Lily. Suddenly, Lily herself broke free from Sarah's grasp and stepped forward, her small voice surprisingly clear amidst the tension. You're not my dad, she declared, her eyes wide and unwavering as she looked at Mark. My dad is kind. My dad loves me. She then turned, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the angels, finally settling on Hammer. They are my dads. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by a murmur of approval. Hammer's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he looked at Lily, then hardened again as his gaze returned to Mark. You heard the girl, Hammer said, his voice now a dangerous growl. She's made her choice. Now get out. Mark's face flushed an angry red. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I'm coming back for her. You try that, Hammer said, taking a deliberate step forward, his towering presence suddenly more menacing than ever. And you'll regret it far more. His voice dropped to a near whisper, audible only to Mark. Every one of us is Lily's father. You lay a hand on her. You threaten her. You even look at her wrong again, and you'll have 50 fathers to answer to. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, a palpable force. Mark, for all his bluster, finally seemed to grasp the true depth of the angel's resolve. He hesitated, his eyes darting between Hammer and the other stern faces, then slowly backed away, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He stumbled backward, his bravado crumbling, and then turned and practically ran out of the clubhouse, the heavy door slamming shut behind him, leaving an echoing silence. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. Sarah sagged against Lily, her knees weak with adrenaline. Lily, however, stood tall, her small hand reaching for Hammer's, a gesture of quiet trust. Hammer knelt, his large hand enveloping Lily's. "You were very brave, little one," he murmured, his voice surprisingly gentle. Lily looked up at him, her eyes shining. "He's not coming back, is he?" Hammer's jaw tightened. "Not if he knows what's good for him." He then looked over at Sarah, a silent question in his gaze. Sarah nodded, a wave of profound gratitude washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, all of you." Hammer stood, his gaze sweeping over the assembled angels. "This club," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound purpose, "has always been about family, about protecting our own. And Lily, she's ours. We made a promise to her, and to her mother, and we'll keep it. No one, absolutely no one, is going to hurt her again. This isn't just a place for us to ride and forget. It's a sanctuary, and we will defend it, and every soul within it, with everything we have." A roar of agreement erupted from the angels, a unified chorus of loyalty and fierce devotion. Lily, nestled safely between her mother and the formidable protection of her new family, smiled. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a deep, abiding peace settle over her heart. The threat had been real, terrifying, but it had also solidified their place within this unconventional family, binding them with an unbreakable promise. The plan takes shape. The clubhouse air thrummed with unspoken dread, a tangible weight pressing against the dusty beer bottles on the shelf. Mark's sudden departure had offered fleeting relief, but the specter of his return, of legal battles and the agony of forced separation, gnawed at Lily's heart like a phantom ache. Curled in Hammer's lap, her small fingers traced the jagged landscape of his scarred bicep. Beside them, Sarah, pale yet resolute, her gaze darting between Lily and the grim faces of the angels gathered around the long table. "He won't simply vanish," Axe declared, his voice a low growl. "He has a claim, however tenuous." "Tenuous is generous," Sarah countered, her voice possessing a strength Lily hadn't heard before. "He's never truly been a father." Hammer's hand stroked Lily's hair. "What we know doesn't matter. What a court sees on paper, that's everything." The stark truth descended, heavy as a funeral shroud. Lily clung tighter to Hammer's hand. "I don't want to leave. I want to stay here. With you." A wave of fierce loyalty rippled through the angels. "She's ours, Hammer." "No one's taking her." "We need an impenetrable plan," Hammer stated, his gaze sweeping over each man. "One that ensures Mark never darkens her path again." He turned to Sarah. "You mentioned his record, Sarah." Sarah nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. "Petty offenses, DUIs, a few assault charges that were plea bargained down. Nothing that would automatically revoke custody, probably. But he was always unpredictable." "Unpredictable we can leverage," Reaper murmured, a glint in his eye. "A documented pattern." "He's never held a steady job," Sarah continued, her confidence growing. He drifts, mostly, living off his cons. His apartment is a squalor. He can barely sustain himself, let alone a child. Excellent, Hammer affirmed. That's our foundation. We'll demonstrate to the court his unsuitability as a parent. Not just emotionally, but practically. We'll prove he's a hazard. Skull, typically reserved, spoke up. We can start compiling official reports on those past charges. Trace his employment history, or lack thereof. Document his living conditions. And we need to showcase Lily's flourishing here, Axe added. That this is a stable, nurturing environment, defying the surface perception of a motorcycle club. Lily straightened, a spark igniting in her eyes. I can help. I can show them my good grades. And how you all help me with my homework. She looked at Reaper. And how you teach me about bikes. A soft chuckle rippled through the room. Reaper winked. That's right, sweetheart. You're our star witness. Watching Lily, Sarah felt a surge of fortitude. And I can testify to his neglect. The times he left Lily alone, the times he hit me in front of her. I have journals. Hammer's jaw tightened. That's crucial, Sarah. Every single detail. We'll secure a formidable lawyer, one who comprehends this kind of battle. Someone unafraid of us, but respectful of our dedication to Lily. The mention of a lawyer stirred a fresh ripple of apprehension in Lily. Lawyers had always been intimidating figures, their words an incomprehensible tangle. But the way Hammer spoke, it sounded like an ally. We must be proactive, Hammer stressed, his gaze unwavering. Don't wait for him to file. We'll file first. For sole custody, with Sarah's unwavering support. We'll assert that Mark has abdicated his parental duties, and that Lily's well-being is paramount. And how do we present ourselves as... Well, not your typical biker gang. Sarah gestured vaguely at their patched vests and tattoos. Axe grunted. We've contributed more to this community than half the city council. The charity rides, the toy drives, the food banks. Our reputation isn't entirely villainous. Precisely, Hammer agreed. We will spotlight every positive action this club has undertaken, every community event, every act of kindness. We will show them we are a family, a true support system, not just a band of roughnecks. He looked from Sarah to Lily. This isn't solely about protecting Lily. It's about forging an impenetrable fortress around her. And around you, Sarah. We will ensure both your permanent safety. A quiet resolve settled over the clubhouse, eclipsing the earlier anxiety. The angels, usually boisterous, became singularly focused. Each man mentally cataloging memories and resources. This was more than a plan. It was a crusade. Lily, absorbing their words, felt a warmth bloom in her chest. This was her family, and they were fighting for her, for them. She met Hammer's gaze, her eyes alight with a blend of hope and fierce determination. We'll win, won't we? Hammer's expression was resolute. We always do, Princess. We always do. He squeezed her gently, a silent vow echoing in the room. The battle for Lily's future had just begun, and the angels stood ready for war. They would deploy every legal avenue, every shard of evidence, every ounce of their collective loyalty to safeguard Lily and cement her place within their unconventional, fiercely protective family. This was not merely about winning a court case. It was about defining the very essence of family. Dreams of kindness. The scent of pine cleaner mingled with the faint, sweet aroma of cinnamon from the school cafeteria as Lily walked down the brightly lit hallway. Her hand, small and surprisingly steady, was clasped in Sarah's, a silent anchor. Today, however, felt different. The usual nervous flutter in her stomach, a remnant of the old life, was replaced by a burgeoning sense of calm. She remembered the dream she'd had last night, vivid and comforting. A vast, sun-drenched meadow dotted with wildflowers. In the dream, she wasn't alone. A colossal oak tree, its branches spreading wide, offered cool shade. And beneath it, not monsters, but the familiar, reassuring faces of Hammer, Axe, and even the quieter angels. Their smiles warm and genuine. They weren't riding bikes. They were simply there. A silent, powerful presence. She had woken with a smile on her face, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Sarah, too, felt a quiet strength blossoming within her. She watched Lily's profile, the slight upturn of her lips, the relaxed set of her shoulders. It was a stark contrast to the perpetually anxious child she had once been. The thought of Mark still sent a shiver down her spine, a lingering shadow, but it no longer consumed her. Now, armed with the angel's unwavering support and the tangible evidence of her journals, a new resolve hardened her gaze. She knew the legal battle ahead would be arduous, but for Lily, she would face 1,000 marks. "Morning, Lilybug." Hammer's voice, a gravelly rumble, broke the quiet. He emerged from the principal's office, his leather vest creaking softly, a stack of freshly printed papers in his hand. "Looks like we're making headway." His eyes, though weary, held a spark of triumph. He bent down, his massive frame surprisingly agile, and ruffled Lily's hair. Principal Miller was cooperative. "Very impressed with your grades, kiddo," Lily beamed, a genuine, unrestrained smile that reached her eyes. "Really, really," Hammer confirmed. "Says you're a model student. Smart as a whip." He winked at Sarah. "Guess we've got ourselves a little genius on our hands." Sarah's chest swelled with pride. "She always was," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. The weight of years of suppressing Lily's brilliance, of fearing Mark's jealous rages, began to lift. The conversation then shifted, becoming more hushed, more serious. Hammer led them to a quiet corner of the hallway, away from the passing students. "The lawyer thinks we have a strong case," he began, his tone grave. "Mark's rap sheet, the documented instability, his neglect. It all paints a pretty clear picture. But the real clincher will be your testimony, Sarah. And these." He tapped the stack of papers in his hand. "Copies of your journals, every word, every date. It's powerful stuff." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the papers. Seeing her own pain, meticulously recorded, laid bare in black and white, was both terrifying and liberating. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm, surprising even herself. "For Lily. For us." Hammer nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. "We're also building a case for the club's community involvement. All the charity rides, the toy drives, the food banks we've supported. It shows we're not just what some people might think we are. We're a family, a good family." Lily, though she didn't fully grasp the legal intricacies, understood the core message. They were fighting for her. Her dream of the kind, protective oak tree, solidified into a real, tangible promise. She looked at Hammer, then at her mother, and a warmth spread through her. She felt safe, truly safe, for the first time in her life. This was her family, unconventional perhaps, but fiercely loyal. And together they were building something strong, something impenetrable. The whispers of fear that had once haunted her were replaced by a growing melody of hope, a symphony of kindness that promised a brighter future. She imagined the fortress, not of stone, but of love rising around them, unbreakable and eternal. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the hues of orange and purple, Lily sat on the porch swing, a drawing pad in her lap. Her crayon moved with purpose, sketching a grand, sprawling tree. Its branches reached high, adorned with tiny, colorful birds. At its base, not just one, but many figures stood, their faces smiling, their arms linked. She drew her mother, her face radiant, and next to her, Hammer, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Around them, other figures, some with long hair, some with beards, all familiar, all protective. She titled the drawing, in careful block letters, "My Family Tree." It was a dream, yes, but one that was rapidly becoming her reality. The grand arrival. The day of the custody hearing broke with a thick, humid promise of rain, a fitting atmospheric mirror to the knot of anxiety in Sarah's gut. Lily, a beacon of defiance in her bright yellow sundress, clung to her mother's hand, her usual ebullience muted by the solemnity of the morning. Road captain, unusually formal, in a crisp button-down that barely contained the sprawl of his tattoos, knelt before her. "Remember our talk, little bird," he rumbled, his voice a low, anchoring comfort. "Just speak your truth." Lily's wide eyes affirmed her understanding. Their arrival at the courthouse drew every gaze and hushed whisper. Not a thunderous engine roar, but a quiet, unified procession. The angels, a formidable vanguard in their dark leather and denim, dismounted from gleaming machines, their typical boisterousness replaced by a reverent hush. They formed a protective semicircle around Sarah and Lily, an unspoken bulwark of solidarity. Even in their subdued posture, their collective presence exuded an unyielding strength, a palpable declaration of unwavering allegiance. Mark was already there, flanked by a sleek, expensive-looking lawyer. His possessive gaze immediately snared Sarah, prompting Lily to instinctively recoil closer to Road Captain. Inside, the courtroom was a stark, unforgiving expanse. The sharp, mechanical hum of the air conditioning starkly contrasted the oppressive humidity outdoors. The wooden benches felt hard, unwelcoming. As they settled, the angels dispersed among the rows, their leathery presence subtly softening the room's harsh angles, imbuing unexpected pockets of warmth. Road Captain, ever the silent guardian, positioned himself directly behind Sarah, his proximity a steadying force. The judge, a woman with piercing, intelligent eyes, called the case. Mark's lawyer launched into a polished, scathing indictment of Sarah, painting her as an unfit mother. He meticulously highlighted her past financial struggles and the unorthodox nature of her current living situation. He then cast the angels as a dangerous, unpredictable influence, twisting their genuine kindness into cynical manipulation. Lily squirmed, her small hand instinctively finding Road Captain's, her brow furrowed in a nascent mix of confusion and anger. Then it was Sarah's turn. She spoke with a quiet determination, her voice gaining a steady power with each word. She recounted years of abuse, her meticulously kept journals laid bare as irrefutable evidence. She described the chilling fear, the suffocating isolation, and then the pivotal moment. Lily's brave plea, the angel's unexpected embrace. She articulated the peace and stability they had found, the blossoming of Lily's potential. She spoke of love, not as a trite sentiment, but as a tangible, transformative power that had rebuilt their lives. The judge listened intently, her expression an enigma. Lily was called to the stand. Her small frame seemed almost swallowed by the imposing witness box. She scanned the faces, her gaze briefly settling on Mark's before finding solace in the steadfast eyes of Road Captain and the other angels. The judge, her voice gentle, asked Lily about her life. Lily, in a clear, unwavering voice, described her new school, her friends, her improving grades. She spoke of learning to ride a bicycle, of baking cookies with Mama Jean, of Road Captain teaching her to fix a loose chain on her bike. "They teach me things," she declared, her voice swelling with pride. "They keep me safe. My daddy hurts me. Road Captain doesn't." Mark's lawyer, attempting to undermine her testimony, pressed her, suggesting the angels were coercing her words. Lily's eyes flashed with a fiery independence that startled even Sarah. "Nobody tells me what to say," she asserted, her chin jutting out. "They just listen." Just as the lawyer poised for another assault, the courtroom doors swung open. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Silhouetted against the brilliant hallway light stood 50 more Hell's Angels. These were no casual observers. These were the club elders, chapter presidents from across the state, their faces etched with the gravitas of a long experience. They entered with a slow, measured cadence, their steps echoing in the suddenly silent space. Each man was impeccably dressed, their vests emblazoned with patches that spoke of decades of loyalty and tradition. They filled the remaining empty benches, their silent arrival an undeniable, powerful statement. The sheer weight of their collective presence, an unyielding force of community, and unwavering protection, settled over the courtroom like an impenetrable shield. The judge, momentarily stunned, cleared her throat. "Is there a purpose for this unprecedented gathering?" she asked, her gaze sweeping across the sea of leather and denim. A grizzled elder, his white beard a stark contrast to his weathered face, rose slowly. He looked directly at the judge, his voice a gravelly whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. "We are here, Your Honor," he said, his eyes flicking briefly to Lily, a profound tenderness softening their intensity, "because Lily is family, and we protect our own." 50 fathers. The collective gasp that rippled through the courtroom wasn't entirely from surprise. It was a visceral reaction to the sheer, unyielding force of 50 men in leather, each one a testament to an unspoken code. Mark's lawyer, a man whose tailored suit seemed to wilt under the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure, stammered, "Your Honor, this is highly irregular, an intimidation tactic." Judge Albright, however, held up a hand, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his mouth. He scanned the rows of grim, unblinking faces. "Indeed, counsel, it is unconventional. But these men are merely observing the proceedings, are they not? No outbursts, no disruptions." His gaze lingered on an older angel, his face a roadmap of life lived hard, whose eyes, despite their sternness, held a glint of something akin to paternal pride as he looked towards Lily. "Unless they intend to testify?" Road Captain rose slowly, his voice a low rumble that filled the sudden quiet. "Your Honor, with respect, we are here as a unified family. Lily is our kin. We are here to show the court the breadth and depth of the protection and love she has found." He gestured to the assembled elders. "Each of these men, and countless more, stands ready to offer her a home, a shield, and a future. They are here as her fathers in spirit and in truth." A ripple of murmurs, this time sympathetic, spread through the public gallery. Lily, who had been sitting rigidly beside Sarah, felt a warmth spread through her chest. 50 fathers. The thought was staggering, overwhelming, and utterly comforting. She met the gaze of the elder angel road captain had gestured to, and he offered her a subtle, reassuring nod. It was a silent promise, unbreakable. Mark, his face a furious mask of disbelief, shot a venomous glare at road captain. This is a circus. They're thugs, Your Honor. They'll corrupt her. Objection, Your Honor. Sarah's lawyer, a woman named Ms. Evans, whose sharp intellect was matched only by her calm demeanor, interjected smoothly. Irrelevant and inflammatory. Mr. Thorne's characterization is purely speculative and based on outdated prejudices, not on any evidence presented today. Judge Albright cleared his throat. Sustained. Mr. Thorne, I remind you to adhere to the facts. The court has heard testimony regarding Lily's well-being, her academic performance, and her expressed desire to remain with her mother and her mother's chosen family. We have also heard, at length, evidence pertaining to your parenting style. The judge's tone grew colder with the last phrase. The arrival of the elders, their silent but potent presence, had shifted the very air in the courtroom. It was no longer merely a legal battle. It was a declaration of unwavering commitment. The weight of their collective will pressed down on Mark, suffocating his bluster. He saw not just 50 men, but 50 immovable obstacles, each one willing to stand between him and Lily. The judge called for a brief recess. As people began to stir, Lily felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Road Captain. He knelt beside her, his voice barely a whisper. You did good, little fighter. More than good. His eyes twinkled. Looks like you've got quite the fan club. Lily giggled, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful in the tense atmosphere. 50 fathers, she whispered back, looking over at the wall of leather-clad men who, despite their hardened exteriors, watched her with an almost tender protectiveness. During the recess, Ms. Evans approached Sarah and Road Captain, a thoughtful expression on her face. The elder's presence. It was a stroke of genius, Captain. It speaks volumes without a single word. It shows a level of support and community that Mr. Thorne simply cannot counter. She paused, then lowered her voice. I believe the judge is genuinely moved. He values stability and a strong family unit, regardless of its unconventional form. Sarah, still feeling the adrenaline of her testimony, felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a tactic, Ms. Evans, she said, looking towards the angels. It's just who they are. They really are family. Road Captain nodded. Always have been. Always will be. He looked at Lily, who was now quietly sketching in a small notebook she always carried. She was drawing a line of figures, each one a little taller than the last, all wearing vests. She's the heart of it all now. When court reconvened, Judge Albright's demeanor had hardened. He looked directly at Mark, his eyes unwavering. Mr. Thorne, considering the compelling testimony from Ms. Thorne and Lily, corroborated by the extensive documentation of abuse, and further, given the clear and present evidence of a stable, loving, and supportive environment offered by Ms. Thorne and her extended family, the court finds it difficult to reconcile your claims with the reality before us. Mark's lawyer, seeing the writing on the wall, tried one last desperate gambit. Your Honor, we request a full psychological evaluation of the child and of Ms. Thorne to ascertain any undue influence by these individuals. He gestured vaguely towards the angels. Judge Albright sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Counsel, the court has heard enough. The child has expressed herself with remarkable clarity and maturity. The mother has presented herself with courage and conviction. And the family has made its position unequivocally clear. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the angels once more. This court will not separate a child from the only true safety and love she has ever known. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Then, very quietly, a few of the elders nodded, a shared understanding passing between them. The tension, which had been a taut wire, began to slacken, replaced by a fragile hope. Lily looked at her mother, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. Sarah's face was streaked with tears, but they were tears of relief, not sorrow. The battle wasn't over, not entirely, but the tide had undeniably turned. The impenetrable fortress of love and protection that had begun with one small girl's plea had just received its deepest, strongest foundation. The judge continued, his voice resonating with authority. Therefore, the court is prepared to issue a temporary order granting full custody to Ms. Sarah Thorne, with no visitation rights for Mr. Mark Thorne, pending a further hearing to establish permanent custody and protective orders. Furthermore, the court will consider a restraining order against Mr. Thorne to ensure the safety and well-being of both Ms. Thorne and Lily. He slammed his gavel down, the sound echoing through the now silent courtroom. Case adjourned until next month. The air crackled with the sudden release of tension. Sarah collapsed into Road Captain's embrace, tears flowing freely. Lily, though still processing, felt an immense weight lift from her small shoulders. The 50 fathers remained stoic, but a subtle shifting in their posture, a softening around their eyes, betrayed their collective relief. Their mission, for now, was accomplished.